Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 302 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The second of the podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she's wonderful. She's great. She's amazing. She smells nice. Erin Paulette! How you doing, Erin?
My patience is currently running on reserves, and as we record this, it's only the 3rd of June.
Oh.
If you follow my Facebook page, you know what's going on. I'm not going to dredge it up if you don't, but, much like Christmas, if you legitimately, sincerely enjoy and celebrate Pride, I'm happy for you. Get down with your bad self. I'm not going to tell you that you are wrong. For me, though, it's... because, that's when the trolls come out. And it's just like, God forbid anyone should be allowed to celebrate being themselves if who they are is queer. And I very stupidly took the idealistic position of being pro-rights. And that means I get flack from both sides. And so it's trying my patience. It's only the 3rd. One thing I am going to say, and I only just found this out like yesterday, in addition to being Pride Month, June is also PTSD Awareness Month. And I feel like those two things might be related for more than a few folks.
I could definitely see that. It is...
Yeah.
It is a surprisingly wide striking disease. We obviously hear a lot about the service members, and that is not to be belittled in the least. But there's also a lot of there's a lot of it from other stuff, including small children and things like that.
So that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been...
Sounded like you had to think about it for a moment.
Well, I've been really, really busy, but it also hasn't been bad busy. So, yeah, I have been better. I have been more relaxed and all of that. There's just a lot of like little stuff going on around here, but overall things are okay. I made Indian food for dinner, and it was really good. And that's it.
The only Indian food I know about is naan bread and
probably
I've already forgotten the name. Chicken. No, I was actually thinking of chicken tandoori.
Okay, all right, yeah. Actually, I made some tandoori chicken once. That actually, every time I've always had it at like an Indian. I always get it at the Indian buffets because I would never order it just on its own, and I'm always deeply disappointed in it, especially with like the red food dye that they put on it and all that. That it's one of those. Oh, it just looks so vibrant and good, and it's one of those like, it's just okay grilled chicken. But I found a recipe for it where it was a really good marinade and marinated in like yogurt, lemon juice, garam masala, and a few other things, and it comes out really, really good. But still not a favorite. But no, this was all vegetarian stuff. I made dal fry and rajma, which is just simply the Hindi word for red beans, but it's a red bean curry, and came out really good. I'll make it in the Instant Pot, and I made naan bread. Because I love making naan bread. I've got a technique that comes out so good that nobody wants to hear about. Maybe you do. Message me. So yeah, that's all. It was a decent weekend. It was a busy day. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you right now, there's one of the things right there that actually sums up my weekend. Is I got a pressure washer, and I got a pressure washer, and but what did you get? Make and model, dude. That's what I want to know. What kind of pressure washer did you get? I think it's a Ryobi. It's green.
I
don't remember if
green is Ryobi.
It's electric. It's fine. It's not so great that I'm like, oh, this is the one pressure washer everyone furthermore, to the detriment of it was the little adapter piece that connects the hose to the pressure washer for the water feed was a plastic fitting. And so, yep, Aaron knows exactly. Yep. At one point I was screwing it in and it just stripped out. And I said, oh, that sucks. So I ordered a replacement that was all brass. And I'm like, this is perfect and good. And when it showed up, I tried to put it together and it wouldn't go together. So I'm like, I probably got the wrong thing, and took some time, went to the hardware store, tried to find the part that I thought I was missing. And went through, couldn't find anything. Next thing you know, it's like, it's all right. It's winter time now. It's getting cold. I'm not running the pressure washer when it's cold and crappy out. And, I'll deal with it next year. Finally, like last year, I started working on it and I was super busy. So I figured out that I just had to push harder to get the two pieces to connect. And it was just they hadn't broken in yet. So got them together, got them working. Tried to get everything screwed in. I was having some trouble with my hands. So like once my hands got wet, they just started shredding. And so it was just a big bloody mess. And I got frustrated, went inside, and didn't have time to deal with it again. Well, I finally figured out all the things that were wrong with it the other day. And I like pressure washed all the things. And I will just say that one of my neighbor's kids was riding her bike up and down the sidewalk, and she stopped and went, "What's that?" And I said, "This is a pressure washer." She just is like, "That doesn't help me at all." She's like 6. She's like, "That doesn't help me at all." Like, what's a pressure washer? I said, "It's like, it's cleaning, but it's also violent." and she was like, and she gave me the look that she gives me all the time, because yes, I'm the weird dad on the block. And I said, "Do you want to see?" And she got, with the wide open mouth with missing teeth. It was beautiful. Pigtails coming out from under a bike helmet. The wide-eyed smile with missing teeth. That is happiness personified. And then I just went and just cleaned all the gunk off my windows with it. And she went, "That's cool." But yeah,
it's like when a garden hose hulks out.
Yeah. And so, but also because it'd been like 2 years since I'd gotten this thing running, it was the before and after was like the infomercials. Like I was peeling off like a whole bunch of crap off of stuff. And so, yeah, that felt really, really good. And it was also a really, really hot day. And so the mist spray of the blowback from that felt really nice too. So that was a good thing. I got something that absolutely needed to get done for a long, long time done. And it was violent cleaning.
Oh, that's cool. I asked because I'm in the market for a pressure washer, and so I'm looking for recommendations.
I will look it up after I will look it up tomorrow when I'm editing this part.
Well, I mean, considering that your recommendation of it was, it's all right.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold off.
Yeah, it is totally fine. I would say for home use, you probably just want to stick with an electric one. When we were on the salmon farm had the gasoline power ones, and those ones you can cut a board in half with. And which is very good and very exciting, but I'm realizing that I don't want to be pressure washing the very, very expensive siding on my house with something that can carve.
I'm just thinking of Tim Taylor from Tool Time. Yeah. More power.
Oh yeah. No, I think I've told the story for a blooper reel, but at one point I was tending the divers. They got a shortened wand for it, so it was really just like a little snub-nosed pressure washer, and that was
an Obrez.
Yeah, exactly. It really was like an Obrez, a pressure washer Obrez, and that was so they could hang on to the nets of the net pens with one hand and blast all the seaweed and hydroids off of the net. And so they would just go down. There'd be like 2 of them at a time would go down, and they'd just be pressure washing the nets to get, good water flow through. And I was just at this point in time, I was tending them. So you're just watching the bubbles. And if they come up and need help going through, you just make sure no one's getting into any trouble. And at one point, one of the hoses snapped or sprung a leak, and it started spraying a geyser of water out of it. And stupid me did the little Dutch boy thing, and I stuck my thumb on it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I pressure washed a hole in my thumb with salt water.
Oh, no.
That was really unpleasant. I learned very quickly.
It didn't go through all the way, did it?
No, it didn't go through all the way. I don't know how deep it was. I mean, it was literally just like, it looked like I had jabbed a sewing needle into my thumb with a decent amount of force. But no, it wasn't like the time when one of my coworkers got bit in the thumb by a mouse, and he had a hole in the pad of his thumb and a little blood mark underneath the nail.
Ooh, ow.
It'd gone all the way through. They do that.
Ooh, that's shuddersome.
Yeah. Let's change the subject to something far more unpleasant.
Oh, God, I was dreading this. All right. Yeah, I know. We have to do it because everyone's talking.
Yeah, this is, I'm doing this just because everywhere I turn in the political sphere, the left wing, the right wing, the center, everybody's talking about Donald Trump has been convicted of 34 felonies. And that's all I'm going to say about this, because we are a Second Amendment political podcast. We are not a partisan podcast. We are not endorsing anybody for president. This is not a thing that we're really caring about. And all I have to say is I have a link to Stephen Gutowski at the Reload. He dedicated a whole amount of like this week's podcast to it, and he's written a couple of articles about it, noting the significance that Trump is now the first former president, and he's a candidate for president who is a prohibited person. And he's making it seem like that's kind of significant for the Second Amendment political sphere. And I just wanted to say on this podcast, Stephen, you're great. I love you, man, but I don't agree at all. I don't think Trump cares, and I don't think this makes a lick of difference. Trump is going to feel the same way about guns as he's going to feel, and this has nothing to do with it, because number one, he's appealing it already. He's already started, the appeal for the case. And so there's a chance that he is going to have this overturned. If it's overturned, it's like it never happened. And so it's not like he's going to have sympathy for prohibited people, because if it gets overturned, he was never a prohibited person. It's not like certain people who've had their status expunged or sealed so that now they are no longer prohibited people, but they were convicted and they got dead to rights, and they served their time, and then they threw themselves at the mercy of the court to get their rights back and were successful. This is not going to be like that. Furthermore, I don't think he cares, because he's a former president. He has a Secret Service security detail until the day he dies. He doesn't need a gun. He's got people carrying guns for them. Actually, Stephen Gutowski did say this in his podcast, and so I will say, although I say disagree with you do. I'm going to give you the best last word on that. Is he said the saying of I carry a gun because a cop is too heavy. Trump's carrying a whole team of cops.
Mm-hmm.
With that probably carry automatic weapons. So he doesn't care. If he is never allowed to touch a gun again ever for the rest of his life, it's not like he's an avid shooter. It's not like he's an avid collector. He does allegedly own a bunch of guns. Some have been, I've heard that some of the people that have made these like Trump commemorative guns that make us all cringe. And I hope even if you're a Trump lover, it makes you cringe, because God. And then furthermore, there was the infamous on his New York City carry permit. He had to list the guns that he had, and I think it was a Smith & Wesson 642 and an H&K USP 45 compact was, I believe, were the two guns that he had on his carry permit. And so those were at least part of his life. I don't know if he still has them or not, but yeah, he did have guns, but we don't see him with guns. He doesn't talk about guns a lot. He's clearly not particularly knowledgeable about guns. So yeah, he's not going to care. It's not going to make a lick of a difference. The cases that Hunter Biden is now entering into that will start, I think, pretty soon. I think they're starting jury selection on that, and we'll be covering that when there's something to cover. That will be the much more significant presidential level gun rights case.
I have nothing to add. I've been trying to avoid this.
Yeah, no, you said you're not going to make me talk about Trump, and I'm like, really not. I wanted to mention it because it's been on everybody's mind, and I think that it would be more obnoxious to just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of obnoxious,
oh God,
this isn't even really obnoxious. This story legitimately makes me mad, and this is Families of Uvalde shooting victims sue Activision over Call of Duty's role. Yeah, this just makes me so angry. I hate the people who do this blame game, especially as someone with a scientific background, is Activision has sold so many. I mean, number one, there's probably like a dozen different Call of Duty games. I don't even know how many there are out there, but like I can easily think of like 5 or 6 right off the top of my head, and I'm sure there's a ton more that I'm not aware of. And so these games have sold like millions and millions of copies each, and they're insanely popular. And I have played them. They're good games. They're fun. The single player is usually pretty lousy, but the multiplayer is a whole lot of fun, and all that, and all of these people who play these violent video games who don't go on to be violent people. I see this like blaming, the shooter breathes air, so therefore we need common sense air control.
It's a moral panic, just like we've seen basically since the beginning of recorded history. I mean, I've lived through various rock and roll panics, the explicit lyrics, the backmasking, the satanic lyrics, business about rap, of course the D&D satanic panic, and
film track number 1 is Mazes and Monsters. Tom Hanks's first starring role in a movie was a D&D moral panic.
Mm-hmm. And so this really is what it makes me think of. And you've got parents who are thinking, my child spends too much time playing video games, and then someone says, these video games are murder simulators, to use the phrase popularized by Jack Thompson, a lawyer who made these claims, and he was subsequently disbarred. I'm not sure if there's a relation between the two, but really, this is what it reminds me of. There's something going on that the children like that I don't understand and don't like, so clearly this is the root of all evil, and we've got to get rid of it. Meanwhile, and this is probably going to be dismissed for the reasons I'm going to list, but first of all, in 2011, the Supreme Court established video games are a form of expression that enjoys First Amendment protection. And so it's going to be difficult to argue against that. It's not impossible. But also, and far more recently, in 2020, the American Psychological Association made a statement that despite the popular and the political accusations that there is no sufficient scientific evidence to support a causal link between violent video games and violent behavior. And so between those two, I don't think the suit is going to succeed. But as we've unfortunately seen so many times, a lot of times the purpose of lawfare is just to bleed companies.
Mm-hmm.
And, hopefully this is dismissed with prejudice. Hopefully Activision can get attorney's fees back, but I'm not going to hold my breath for that.
No, it's just, yeah, it's that. And again, what we always point out, where I don't remember, maybe you do off the top of your head, how, I mean, obviously the killer did have some prior law enforcement contact, but I don't think he had nearly the amount as, say, the killer at Parkland or the guy who shot Gabby Giffords. Those people were frequent flyers in the back of police cruisers, but were never charged with any of the serious crimes that they were openly committing and were being arrested for, which would have made them prohibited people. I don't remember quite if this person had. I know they had some prior contact, but I can't remember if it was anything real serious that would possibly put them on a prohibited person list if the system had done its job and actually charged them when they had a case. But certainly to be said was the killer got their guns legally, killed their grandmother, stole her truck, drove to the school, crashed the car outside the school, which alerted everybody in the school. So they put the school on lockdown while he was still essentially outside school grounds. And then police totally missed him in the parking lot. And then he just walked up to one of the doors. And even though the school was on lockdown, emphasis on lock, the door was not locked. Something was, I've never actually heard why, if they've ever figured out why the door was unlocked. And then the shooter is on camera walking up and down the hallways, testing doors to classrooms. And he finds one that, again, should have been locked, but was not locked, and entered, and then started killing the people inside that classroom. And then police showed up, and then they spent, what was it, an hour and a half, however long it was, just looking at their phones and marking time in the hallway. And even though they were supposed to be going in, that's their training. And it wasn't until a border patrol agent actually went rogue and disobeyed orders and actually went outside and engaged the killer through the outside window and put this all to an end. So if you want somebody to blame beyond the prick that shot the place up, because obviously he's the big problem, but he's also dead, and good for him. But the school system clearly dropped some balls, because why was there not at least monthly inspections to make sure that all the doors lock and all of that? I mean, I don't know if you're like me, Aaron, but when I lock my front door, when I go out to run errands, I like to test it and make sure it doesn't open after I lock it.
Yes, I do. I've maybe just got a little touch of the OCD. As an example, when I do the remote thing on my car and it locks, I got to press it again so that it honks, because the honk is confirmation that I've locked it. If I don't hear the honk, it's like, make the noise.
My new car is very nice in the fact that it knows where I am, and if I walk too far away, it's kind of a little bit of a pain sometimes, because if you want to leave the vehicle unlocked for other people to go into, and you don't want to give everybody the key, it'll still lock itself if you're gone too long. It'll just say, well, he's clearly not coming back, so I'm just going to lock everything up. But there's also there's a button on the tailgate where you can push the button and it will essentially just wait for you to finish unloading things out of the back. And when you leave, it'll just shut the gate and lock the car up. So you grab that last load of groceries, you push the button, walk away, everything closes up. But it also, when the car locks up, it clearly goes to sleep because the mirrors fold in. So if I see those side mirrors fold in, I know that it's not opening for anybody.
Okay, well, yeah, as long as you've got some sort of visual indicator, but I need something, visual, audio, and so, yeah, at night, when I'm making sure that the doors are locked, even though I can see that the little latch thing is turned, I gotta give it a wiggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why there wasn't a protocol for whoever was, whether it be the building custodian or the resource officer or somebody to have him show up at the end of the school day and say to the principal, all right, let's do the test. And they lock the whole school. They do the lockdown drill. They let law enforcement know we're hitting the lockdown button. We're calling a lockdown, locking the school down. And then the officer tries all the external doors. When he does, he, messages the principal and says, all right, cool, let me in. And then goes around and tests every single door in the school. And with all of them done, he signs off of them. All right, this has been certified for this interval. Good. Like it would take an hour every month and you would be able to avoid this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a tough angle. I will say, since people don't know which school my daughter goes to, I will say that they have man trap doors in the school, and they are
now. What's that mean?
Means that there's a door. There's the door to the outside, and there's a vestibule inside the doors, and so in theory, if you were to break your way through the first door, you would then encounter a second set of doors that you would also need to get through, which would buy time for people and things like that, possibly discourage. But I've never seen the man traps closed. They're mostly just left open but they at least, when I do, there has been times when I've been called in the middle of the day to come, deliver something. My daughter spilled something on her clothes, or I think she had a button pop off her a pair of pants once. And like, oh, she needs another pair of pants. I'll be right there. And showed up. And when I'm due there, I have to ring the bell. I have to wait for someone to answer the bell. And then they ask me who I am and what I'm doing here. And then they let me in. And I love it. I love that. That is good stuff. Just that stuff was broken in this. And then furthermore, the cops were broken, and the chief was let go, but everybody else seems to have been okay. And I don't know. I've mixed feelings about that. On one hand, they were definitely following orders to do the wrong thing, but also they were all trained. They all had active shooter training, where it is trained. The sooner you can engage the shooter, the sooner you're going to save lives. And they didn't do that. And if the chief is saying, no, let's not go in, we need to wait for SWAT, though that's exactly what we're trained not to do. We're not supposed to wait for SWAT. We call SWAT, and when SWAT shows up, we can defer to SWAT, but none of that was done. And I speculate how many people died in Parkland because the police were hiding outside behind their cars where it was safe, like the fine, brave, and brilliant people they were. Sarcasm. But in Uvalde, we know for a fact that several people were wounded and were calling for help and later succumbed to their wounds hours later, and they could have been saved. And so this going after Activision is just, not only is it lawfare and despicable in its own self, it's also getting away from the fact that going through, again, we've talked a bunch about Manuel Oliver, who lost his son in Parkland, and sorry for his loss. That sucks. But he goes after gun owners. He blames the NRA for that, not the police, not the school system, not all of the people that failed. And the FBI has openly admitted fault to what they did in Parkland. And yet he's blaming us. No, that's not correct. And so switching over to things that aren't correct, but It was gracious and it's good. We have here a tweet from Brandon Herrera, who Aaron and I have both had the pleasure of meeting.
Have we told that story on the air?
I think it's if we haven't, I think it's good for another telling.
Okay, so last year when I was at the Gundies and I brought Weer'd along as my +1.
I think it was actually 2 years now, or I guess it was last year. Never mind.
I'm pretty sure it was 2023.
Yeah.
So we're there at the range day, and Weer'd is being starstruck. And at one point, he sees Brandon Herrera, and I'm pretty sure he does something like he points in his direction and goes, "Oh, it's Brandon Herrera." And I can tell that Weer'd really wants to go talk to him, because Weer'd is a lot like an excitable puppy. And so, his proverbial tail is wagging real hard. And so I say, well, go talk to him. And Weird like, no, I don't know. He's kind of busy. I'm sure he doesn't want to talk to me. And suddenly he's all bashful. I mean, this crazy extroverted guy. And so it's just like, okay, fine. and I'm the mean friend. And so I don't know if I physically grab you by the hand or just proverbially, but I get you over there. And Brandon is talking to someone, and I mean, it's not that I'm rude, but I don't much care. And it's a social event. He's going to be interrupted. And I don't know when I'm going to see him again. So I just pop in and say, "Hi, really sorry to interrupt. I know you're busy, but this is my friend Weird, and he's really a big fan, and he just wants to say hi." And then I get out of the way, and Brandon was very gracious. It was like, "Oh, hey, how you doing? Thanks." And didn't treat it like an interruption, was very friendly to Weird. And it really, I'm not going to say it was the ultimate of the trip, but it really was a highlight of the trip.
It really was. And actually, well, even better is since we had already been talking and the ice was broken, thanks to you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
But during the awards ceremony, they had like a major snafu with the production, and something blew up. And this was why we were all told, "Oh, we're having a live award ceremony that is like the next day, but it's because we're pre-recording it, and that was so that if they had snafus, they could edit them out." And so they had a snafu. They said, "Everyone's going to take a little bit. We'll let you know when everything's working again." And the bar's open. So I went to the bar. I got myself a drink. And I noticed that Brandon was just standing there in the corner, and I went over and I just said hi, and we got talking about a bunch of stuff and all of that. But just super duper sweet and down to earth guy. You see him in his videos, and he's very dramatic and very theatrical, and that's absolutely who he is, but he's also like a real dude. And so, yeah, no, it was absolute pleasure meeting him. And I don't know if we've actually talked about this on the show, but I suspect if you know who Brandon Herrera is, you do know that he was running for the congressional district there, in the greater San Antonio area. And his opponent was Tony Gonzalez. A lot of the people that are chatting him have been calling him Ernie Gonzalez, because his first name, I believe, is Ernesto. But he goes by his middle name. And Tony Gonzalez is still a Republican who voted for Joe Biden's bipartisan. He was one of the bipartisan in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, and Brandon took issue with that, as well as border security was another big thing that he took issue on with him, and so he ran to primary him in the seat, and it was so close in the general election that he did not quite, Tony Gonzalez got the most votes, but he didn't break the 50% mark. And in Texas, if you don't break the 50% mark, then it's a runoff between you and the next highest challenger, which was Brandon Herrera. and they had another runoff, and Brandon lost by 400 some votes. I'm trying to remember if it's over 400 or under 400, but it's right around the 400 mark. And
well, I'm looking at his tweet right now, and he says about 400 votes. And what you need to keep in mind is that this is the first time Brandon has run for anything. And so he was challenging an incumbent, which is difficult. And Gonzalez outspent him like 10-1.
Yes.
And despite all that, barely won. It was like, I'm looking at the tweet here, 50.69% for Gonzalez, and then for Herrera, 49.31%. That is just razor thin when it comes to elections. And so if these were two experienced politicians, that by itself would be something. But considering that this political nobody who came out of nowhere did this well is truly astonishing. And having learned from his, I don't really want to say, learn from his mistakes, but, this is his first time doing it, and he's got experience. And so the next time he decides to run, he will have greater depth of experience to draw upon and perhaps run a better campaign. And, looking at how well he did, people who were on the fence about voting for him may very well vote for him again. And so we didn't talk about this election before because it was a little too political for us, but, well, it's worth talking about now because, okay, this is a very solid Second Amendment supporter who's running for office, and we need more of those. And so, yeah, he absolutely deserves to be proud of this, and I really think that the next time he runs for election, he's going to be a serious contender as opposed to the dark horse that he was.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And it was close to a week before he sent out this tweet. And so I was wondering, like, his channel went completely dark. His Twitter went completely dark. And so I was definitely wondering, and I'm sure, like, there's no doubt in my mind that he was considering, do I request a recount? Because 400 votes in a district that size is not a lot. And you got to imagine that for sure there's going to be some bad counts, some fraudulent votes that happens to everybody on every side out there. But but he's choosing not to, which is good, because it's unless you really feel like you got, something bad happened, calling for a recount is such a huge waste of capital. So he's decided to bow out, which is great. There's certainly some talk that Tony Gonzalez might be in big trouble going forward. He may actually lose his seat now because he spent so much of his war chest trying to torpedo a YouTuber. And I'll tell you right now, I won't shed a tear if it happens, even if it is to an anti-gun Democrat, because anti-gun is anti-gun. And
so I don't understand. How would he lose his seat for not having money? I mean, he won the election.
He won that's the primary. He's the general election's in November.
Oh, yes, I see what you're saying now.
And so he's going to go up against the Democrat challenger in what is a swing district, and he's already pretty bloodied because just like Brandon in his boxing match, he tuned up Tony quite a bit. And so there's certainly something to be said about that. And I will say that I'm super busy, and we've got plenty of segments right now, so it's not happening right off the bat. But I did happen to pull some audio of Tony Gonzalez talking about why it wasn't such a bad thing that he voted for gun control, among some other stuff. So there's a future Weird Audio Fisk with this smarmy jerk.
I haven't found the moral strength to watch the video, but I keep seeing recommended in YouTube about how Gonzalez called Herrera a racial epithet. And I don't know if it's factual or just someone being clickbaity.
I know Tony Gonzalez ran a really, really shoddy negative campaign. I haven't heard him actually call Brandon a racial epithet. He has definitely accused Brandon of being a racist, citation needed, and has also accused Brandon of being a Nazi. The citation being that Brandon did a video of the MP44 where he wore a Nazi uniform in the cosplay as he likes to do, and dismisses the entire part where Brandon goes, "This gun is really, really cool. The Nazis totally weren't." I mean, coming as someone who is very much has a deep dislike of the Soviet Union and what it did to the world and what it did to its people, and yet I've got an entire safe full of communist block guns because I enjoy collecting them. All right, let's move to some good news.
Wait, we have good news?
Oh, we have good news. Now we're entering into the good news section.
All right.
A district court judge shoots down Massachusetts license to carry law. So this story comes out of the Massachusetts city of Holyoke, and essentially a man was arrested. It sounds like it was on a single incident. I'm reading on the court filing. Essentially, he was arrested and charged with assault and battery, domestic, aggravated assault and battery, and essentially conspiracy to violate the Controlled Substance Act. So I assume he was, they charged him with wanting to get drugs. I don't know. I'm not diving too deep into it because essentially all of these charges were continued without a finding, meaning that the court conceded that they didn't have a great case against him, and that if he and gave him the option to essentially go on probation, and if he completed the probationary period without getting into any sort of legal trouble in that time frame, essentially everything would be dismissed. And that was what he chose, and that sounds like a great thing. And he was, I believe from my reading, successful at his probationary period. So he was free and clear of any judicial oversight and any pending charges and all of that. And then he applied for his Massachusetts license to carry, which, for clarification for anyone who might not know, just because it says license to carry, well, actually now after post-Bruin, when it says license to carry, it is your license to carry. It is a carry permit, but it's also an ownership permit. My first carry permit in the state of Massachusetts was restricted targeted hunting, which meant that it was a license to carry and I could not carry. That would be illegal. It was just allowed me to own guns and transport firearms not on my person and not loaded to a firing range or to sporting activities. And so
I'm sorry, you had a license to carry that didn't license you to carry.
Yep. How it worked after Bruin, Mara Healy openly just said, yep, nope, the system is gone. I actually contacted a friend of mine who had a restricted permit and said, congratulations, you now have the cherished thing was all lawful purposes, or restrictions none, depending on which variant of the permit you have, or which generation. I think they changed it around. Originally it was ALP, all lawful purposes, which just meant if you weren't breaking the law, you can use the gun that way. And then it later on switched to my current permit has restrictions none, but I'll be renewing at the end of this year, and hopefully my new one will just not have that line at all. It'll be interesting to see. But essentially he applied for a permit and he was denied because he was he was deemed by the police chief as an unsuitable person because of this court history. He was deemed dangerous. And they challenged it. And
I could have sworn I've heard things like this before, like with North Carolina's pistol purchase permit, where you had to be of good character, and yet there was no definition of what of good character meant. It basically was, does the sheriff feel like signing it?
Correct. Yep. Well, I mean, the North Carolina one specifically is a Jim Crow law. So it was the of good character is what color's your skin. But yeah, pretty much, Massachusetts, 100%. There is zero stipulation to what is good character, what is bad character, what can the police cite, what can they not cite. There is all sorts of stuff. There was a person who famously lost their license because they were making off-color jokes on social media. And the police chief decided that was gross and offensive, and busted his permit down to a Class C, and he had to get rid of most of his guns.
Sounds like you could challenge that on First Amendment grounds.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember what happened to this guy, but he did challenge it. I don't remember what happened. So clearly, I think he probably ended up settling and just ran out of money. But because these things are expensive, but absolutely that could be First Amendment grounds as well. But right now they essentially they use the Bruin test on this and found that the disarming people because of essentially settled cases and things like that was not something that happened in this time period, and so therefore this was unconstitutional, and hopefully the chief will not play any shenanigans, but I can't I can't I can't say that there's any hope to that one way or the other, because that's non-compliance has definitely been the name of the game as of late, but it certainly has shown that denying somebody on just BS grounds is not allowed, even in the state of Massachusetts, which again, I got to renew my permit coming up. And again, it's a permit to own, not just to carry. So I always get a little bit puckered up during that time frame because especially since they're almost always late in renewing it. So there's a time where my permit has expired and I have a grace period, so that's okay. But this is the permit that is all the guns I own, and my gun collection is very large. So this is really, really good news.
Well, it's not the kind of test case I would want. I would want something a bit more pristine. But I find myself returning to the H.L. Mencken quote again and again. And that particular quote is, "The trouble with fighting for human freedom is that one spends most of one's time defending scoundrels." Because it's always the scoundrels, the ne'er-do-wells, and the criminals who get into it first. And, if you believe in rights, you believe in rights for all people. The problem is that a lot of times the people that you're defending don't have clean hands.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the good news for this, though, is that that you usually pick those because those cases are more set to win. You've got a better choice when you have someone like a Dick Heller or an Otis McDonald, who were both squeaky clean men. I mean, Dick Heller's still with us. Otis McDonald has passed away, but I've met Dick Heller, and everything I've heard and seen of the man is he is absolutely just salt of the earth. I wish I could have met Otis McDonald, because he also seemed like an amazing man and just a wonderful person and lived a great life. And so when these guys are picked as the people to challenge a jurisdiction's gun laws, these are the great people that you pick, because you're not going to have any of those character things being used against them in the court. But all that being said, if you do have a client with a very dirty face that challenges a law and they win it's actually a better victory because
if it applies to them, it's definitely going to apply to all the other people who are much cleaner.
Correct. They could always go back with DC going, oh, well, but Dick Heller was a security guard and he had training and all that stuff. So yeah, if this person doesn't have training or this person's got a few skeletons in their closet, well, we can deny them the right to own a gun. And in theory, that could go through and it would have to be challenged and it had to be a whole new court case. So yeah, moving on to other court cases. And we've talked about this one before and this story is really, really cool. So this is the NRA versus, what is it? Is it NRA versus Vulo? Is the actual case? Yeah.
We've talked about this before.
Yes.
I don't have a memory anymore. I have to take your word for it.
Yeah. Only briefly. The key, I remember talking about it because the whole key was that the ACLU had thrown in with the NRA, and we're like, oh my goodness, the ACLU, as a general rule, has been very, very good about civil liberties so long as they're not the Second Amendment. And
yeah. Like the joke goes, how does the ACLU count to 10? 1, 3, 4, 5.
Mm-hmm. And
so yeah, just the fact that they acknowledged that the NRA exists is huge. Then to take their sides is even better.
Yeah, well, the big bombshell on this was the NRA won. Essentially, to summarize the case, essentially the this New York State official, what was their position? Because it's not the AG, but essentially
superintendent of something or other.
Yeah. Either way, I'll let you skim as I'm blabbering.
Here we go. Former, because she no longer is in the position, superintendent of New York's Department of Financial Services.
Mm-hmm. And they were pressuring creditors and insurance providers to dump the NRA from their various policies, both to grease the wheels in their future endeavors and also to get preferential treatment for violations that may or may not have occurred. And
I mean, not just that, but I mean, she actively punished insurance carriers.
Mm-hmm.
It says here, and I don't know whether this is cumulative or individual, but she fined Lloyd's of London and 2 other insurers more than $13 million for offering to insure NRA's carry guard. Now, admittedly, and I'm not saying this is in defense, but she claims that this was in violation of New York insurance laws. So what I'm getting at here is she can hide behind the law, and whether or not this was a violation remains to be seen. I didn't feel like digging into this right now, but it's not exactly a cut and dry witch hunt.
But it is, she done effed up, and she done effed up hard. She effed up so hard that she got the U.S. Supreme Court to decide 9-0 in favor of the National Rifle Association. And not only that, but the decision was written by Sonia Sotomayor. That's going to leave a mark.
Who I am told is ultra liberal.
She is definitely the Ruth Bader Ginsburg now.
Okay.
Yeah, no, she's the one, and I have heard from credible sources, though again, the FBI quote unquote investigated and found nothing, but that it may have been her office that leaked the Dobbs decision ahead of the actual official Supreme Court ruling.
Mm.
There was definitely a leak that happened. Nobody knows where the leak came from. I suspect many people do know where the leak came from, and they just don't want to say. But Sonia Sotomayor is by far. I have hopes for Kagan and for Brown Jackson. For like, come on, like, oh no, it's a Second Amendment case. Come on, guys. I can see you possibly making a right choice here. Sotomayor on any 2A case is going to be ruling against us no matter what, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was going to be ruling against us every single time there was an opportunity when it comes to Second Amendment issues. And yet, in this case, again, this is a First Amendment case, not a Second Amendment case, but still, Sonia Sotomayor wrote a ruling that went 9-0 in favor of the National Rifle Association and against a New York official. So yeah, this was quite the breath of fresh air.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when the Supreme Court rules unanimously about anything, you done screwed up. And when the opinion is written on this topic by someone who's defined as or described as ultra liberal, wow, New York really overstepped itself. Now, I do want to point out that this isn't actually a reversal of the charges. Essentially, the court sent it back to the original court, dismissing the overturning. Okay, so there was the conviction. It was appealed. The appeal was denied, and then they appealed again to SCOTUS, right? And so SCOTUS took a look at it and said, no, y'all screwed up. You need to do this again. So they didn't actually make a full binding in law ruling, but they gave the courts a very stern look and said, you know what you need to do to fix this.
And a 9-0 stern look, like, again.
Yeah, that sends a message.
Yeah, I mean, it's so common that we have like 5-4 decisions, and so, or, at least, 2 dissenting judges. I've never heard of actually one where it was like went 8-1. That would be an interesting, but it's usually like 5-4, and it's just splitting on partisan lines. When they all agree, when Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan and Ketanji Brown Jackson all agree with like Clarence Thomas and Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Barrett, you done screwed up.
Don't forget Alito.
I won't forget Alito. I'm just picking some. These sometimes can be a little bit of a swing vote. So I'm just picking the people that generally are. We already know how they're voting. Just how the case is being laid out. So yeah, this was great, and it also shows that just like the Second Amendment should be nonpartisan, but it really isn't. The First Amendment really is a nonpartisan issue. And then this last bit, we're talking about reform of the NRA, and I'll lead with a little bit of a correction. I erroneously last week said that Bob Barr was the executive vice president, essentially taking Wayne LaPierre's position. He is not. He is the current president of the NRA, and it is this gentleman, Doug Hamlin, is the executive vice president and CEO. I don't know if they were separate cases and just sometimes both, or if that's a new thing. I don't know. I've always heard Wayne LaPierre was the executive vice president, though they were saying here too he was EVP and CEO. So
in based upon my knowledge, which don't take it as scripture, yes, he was referred to as EVP. That was his title. CEO was his job role. It was just sort of understood that he had CEO powers, but everyone referred to him as executive vice president, I guess, in order to highlight the figurehead status of the president.
Yes,
I'm not
even though Wayne LaPierre was the vice president of the NRA, he was the head of the organization and definitely outranked whoever the current president was.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know why they started saying EVP and CEO. I'm not entirely sure when they started doing it. It may have been as a result of the trial, but it's relatively recent. It's within the past 3-4 years, I want to say.
All right, so I'm not crazy for going like, when did he become the CEO?
Well, I mean, you're crazy, just not because of this.
Yes, but I've got here, it's a link to Shooting News Weekly, and they have an exclusive interview with Doug Hamlin. And overall, it reads well. There's not a whole lot that's really blowing my doors off. It just sounds like the key interest is reforming the NRA and earning their good name back. And I don't know. Did you get any major major quotes that you want to pull out of this one?
No, not really. Much like you, this is what's the term I'm looking for? Tentatively optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sure seems good, but I'm gonna continue to wait until I see some positive action. Now, based upon what he says, I expect some positive action, but I'm disillusioned about the NRA, so I'm just waiting to see something happen.
Yeah, they very clearly dug that hole. It was not like Wayne LaPierre was acting under the cover of darkness and nobody had any idea that gambling was going on at Rick's place. So yeah, this was something that was done very much in the open, and so yeah, they did a lot to damage their reputation. And again, I say to people, keep your eyes peeled. People that are lapsed members, people that are life members who are getting those donation forms in the mail or possibly getting those donation phone calls, hold your water for right now, especially if you get the phone call and they call you up and say, hey, are you interested in donating? We got an election coming up. It's super duper important. And you go, let them know. Say, I am interested. I mean, if you're not interested in donating, just tell the truth. I'm not asking anyone to lie. But if you are interested in donating and you are someone who does donate to Second Amendment groups, let them know that you are interested in donating, but you still need to see a little bit more to regain your trust, just to get it out there. I'm sure a lot of that stuff works its way up the stream. So yeah, we will see what happens, but, I hope that, it'd be pretty hard to do a worse job than Wayne LaPierre, especially after he got frog marched out that way. But
I'm worried the universe is going to see that as a challenge.
Oh.
But just as an example, something that could be done, well, I don't know if it could be done very easily, but something that is like, first off the tip of the tongue is maybe fire the brewer firm.
Mm-hmm.
And the money hemorrhaging, something like $20 million or so worth of attorney's fees, kick them to the curb. That would be a positive change.
Mm-hmm. Another positive change is, and again, speculating ahead, but if Donald Trump does happen to win it, and I am noting that he is currently awaiting sentencing for his 34 felonies, but if Donald Trump does end up winning, it would be great if they were to get his ear, as he claims that Wayne LaPierre had his ear about the bump stock ban, and got him to really tack hard to the Second Amendment and not be quite the fair weather supporter of the Second Amendment that he is. Even fair. Yeah, I guess you could say fair weather, but yeah, but then when the clouds come, he asks for bump stock bans and talks about why suppressors are legal.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I think we've done the news to death. So, but we've also got some other news, and that is that if you have heard of sociology professor David Yamane, you may know that he has a new book out, and it's called Gun Curious, and I sat down with him to discuss it. I am pleased to welcome to the Assorted Calibers podcast, David Yamane. David Yamane, of course, is a professor at, is it Wake Forest University?
It is Wake Forest University, not to be confused with Lake Forest University, which is outside of Chicago.
Yes, and you have you've written a number of books, but just recently you have written a book called Gun Curious, and I am curious about Gun Curious. Tell us all about it.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I think we've traveled in some of the same circles for a long time and never had a chance to meet, so I'm glad to have a chance to talk to you. And the book Gun Curious is really the fruit of my 12 years of wandering around American gun culture, kind of both wandering as a person who became a gun owner at 42 years old after having successfully avoided having any contact with guns up to that point. And also as a sociologist doing a kind of research project on gun culture. So, the book really weaves together that personal story and my sociological observations into what I hope is an interesting tale of one person's take on what American gun culture is all about today.
So, yeah, you said you got into guns later in life, which, by the way, makes me feel great because I happened to not shoot my first gun until 19, and I believe I was 24 when I actually owned my own first gun. And so that makes me feel good because I know so many people who were shooting guns since they were tiny. And what got you there? It's a particularly unique number in the fact that, it's not just as you were cresting into adulthood, you were well on your way. What got you to go from being a non-gun owner to a gun owner?
Yeah, well, one of the subtitle of the book is A Liberal Professor's Surprising Journey Inside America's Gun Culture. So part of that surprise is the things I saw once I was inside, but part of the surprise is the fact that I became a gun owner at all, because if you had talked to me 15 years ago and said, hey, are you going to write a book about guns and become a gun owner? And I'd say, why? That's crazy talk. Of course not. I was a sociologist of religion my whole career. But I moved to North Carolina in 2005 after growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I went to Berkeley for college. I went to the University of Wisconsin for graduate school, and Madison is known as the Berkeley of the Midwest. And so I had this kind of gunless blue bubble that insulated me from this profound reality of American life for most of my adulthood. And then I moved to North Carolina, and over time, it came to seem like everybody in North Carolina had guns. And people I played tennis with, people who were IT professionals, real estate agents, my soon-to-be wife, everybody other than I had guns. And so I first went to the range to shoot because I thought, man, guns are dangerous. Everybody's got guns. I better figure out how these things work. And I was surprised by the end of that short range session, fewer than 50 rounds I fired, that I found myself having fun and I was interested in shooting more. So, this was the surprising entry point, was that I really shot a gun for the first time, not because I was interested in them, but mostly because I was concerned about them.
Now that's an interesting thing, because I see that a lot. The fact that I live here in Massachusetts, I take a lot of people for their first range trip. And I'm going to say people don't really voice it, but I think I read it in them. Were you surprised at what a safe experience it was?
Yeah, I think there was that initial shock of an explosion going off an arm's length from your face, which, I don't know that anything can really prepare you for that. But I think every experience that I had, including that first experience, there's been such a emphasis on safety. I had stereotypes of what it looked like to go to the range with, people just wildly shooting into tree stumps or, doing stupid things. But every experience I've had really always starts with safety and maintenance of safety throughout the experience. And in fact, this may be skipping ahead a little bit, but I take my students at Wake Forest to the gun range as part of our Sociology of Guns course. And one of the reactions that they have to the experience is that in certain ways it's very boring, right? Because it's so methodical, right? That we're, going to review safety. I'm going to be there supervising everybody shooting, one gun at a time, one person at a time. So I don't know whether they think it's going to look like some county fair, shooting gallery. But, I think that safety emphasis has really been an important part of my experience, an important part of what I try to give other people when I take them to the range, especially new shooters.
Yeah, no, I always tell new shooters that our first priority is that we're all going to be safe. No one's going to get hurt during this range sessions. That's number one priority. Second priority, everybody having fun. Third priority is what your target looks like. Mm-hmm. Because so many people are like, how am I shooting? I'm like, don't care. You're shooting safe and you're having fun. They're all going into the berm at the end of the range. That's all I care about right now. We'll start looking at your groups later.
Right.
So as someone who comes from liberal circles, and you said you grew up in California, so I would assume that you kind of enjoyed the rarefied air there, and then went into academia. Did you find any cultural pushback from the people in your left-wing circles when they realized you were getting into guns?
Yeah, I think that one of the advantages of getting into guns when you're 42 years old and you've already established who you are as an adult human being, who you are as a professional, is that it's harder for people to think you're crazy because they already know that you're not crazy. And so, I think that people received me with some curiosity, again, to talk about something that's a key to understanding all of my work. And, some people, they don't interact with me on that basis, but there are a lot of other people who, if we have a chance to chit chat or drinking bourbon or in between games and when we're playing tennis, they do ask questions about how's my work going, what have I been shooting, I've been thinking about getting a gun, what's a good place to start. So I think that it's been pretty positive overall, but then there is also this, I guess, the real life equivalent to shadow banning where, if people are shunning you, you don't always know that they're shunning you. You might just think, oh, I've fallen out of contact with that person, or, my colleagues don't talk to me a ton about my work. And, so I do feel, in certain circles, I am working on the margins, especially professionally. But in my personal life, I don't feel like I've lost any close friends over the issue.
I mean, that's always good to hear. And the same thing goes with me. So
can I just interject? I'm sorry to interrupt
Absolutely.
you, but I'd say the flip side of that is, as I've gotten into guns, I've actually made a lot of new friends, especially people who are very different from me, culturally or politically, people who are part of gun culture their whole lives, who I would have never met in the course of my everyday life, but for the fact that I, became a gun owner and started studying gun culture. So, this is something that's, I think, really enriched my life, is the types of people that I've been able to meet who are very different from me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing that the few people in the Second Amendment community that are not what you would consider to be some of the nicest people you would ever meet are so rare that they tend to stand out. And I think you definitely experienced the same thing that many of us had. Oh man, these people are all so nice and so welcoming. Have you changed some serious minds, especially, in you're in the sociology department of the university. I'm sure there's plenty of people that were staunchly anti-gun. Have you ever had some good heart to hearts? And I'll just warm it up with saying one of my best ones was I was working in a lab that was sponsored by Harvard Medical School, and one of the doctors there was very, very anti-gun and very much looked down his nose at me for being a fairly open gun owner. And I noted to him, I said, "You do understand that you as a physician are going to kill far more people over the course of your life than me as a gun owner." And he just stopped and just knew that he didn't even have an argument against that. And from then on, he started listening to me a lot more when he was asking questions about guns. So I don't know if you've had anything similar to that.
Yeah, I find that it's not a topic of conversation among my colleagues here in the sociology department. We tend to sort of have a laissez-faire attitude, and we, I do my work, you do your work. And as long as we're doing productive work, then we stay out of each other's way. But I can say, I teach this sociology of guns course in the department once a year for the last 9 years. This fall will be the 10th consecutive year I've taught the course. And so I have about 16 students every semester. And what I observe, and I teach a lot of what is, in the book. I say my fundamental perspective is that guns are normal and normal people use guns, that there are these significant but exceptional cases in which guns are used for negative outcomes, But I try to tell the big picture story of how I understand guns and gun owners and gun culture. And the students over the course of the semester don't change their fundamental views of guns. So if they leaned anti at the start, they're kind of anti at the end. If they're positive at the start, they're positive at the end. But what the effect of taking the class has largely is that it smooths some of those rough edges, takes some of the friction out of the people's orientations. So, people who lean more gun control better understand why guns make sense to people who own them, why there are positive aspects of guns, why if there is to be gun control, it needs to be thoughtfully done so as not to infringe on, the rights of people who haven't done anything wrong. And then the people who start pro-gun sort of better understand why some people have negative orientations toward guns. And so I think that softening of those rough edges is a really good starting point to have sort of better, more civil conversations about this issue. Because one thing that's very disheartening for me is when people just stand on their respective sides and yell at each other without any progress towards better understanding.
Yeah, that is a key. Is we make no progress making enemies. Instead, we should be making friends, especially on an issue like the Second Amendment, which I think is the most nonpartisan issue ever. And it frustrates me that in Washington it is partisan.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a political wedge issue. We know that we can predict people's political party affiliation very well if we just know whether they own guns or not. So this is, I think, an unfortunate situation for us to be in. And, I think the other thing is this idea that our fellow citizens are actually enemies because they disagree with us. I can't, again, this is one of my big, I don't even want to say it's a pet peeve because that minimizes it. It's one of my big concerns about the state of our country. When a presidential candidate for a major political party refers to people who are his political opponents as human scum, I think this is just an atrocious state of affairs. And the fact that guns get wound up in that is very disconcerting to me as a gun owner and as a liberal who tries to negotiate this complex world of being a politically liberal gun owner.
Yeah, well, the best we could do is to shout into the void and educate as much as we can, so that hopefully someday that there'll be a schism within that political movement, so that it won't be such a partisan issue. Because it makes no sense why it is.
Yeah, I think the other thing is let's, even if it is a partisan issue, that we should be able as citizens of the same country who have the same goals, which is to live in freedom and to have the best possible society, that we should be able to say, hey, I disagree with your approach to that issue, but you're my fellow citizen, and we'll just have to agree to disagree. There's 340 million Americans, more diverse than any other country in the entire world, covering a huge geographic space. Why would we think that we can all agree on anything, right? I mean, we're never going to agree on everything. So how we disagree matters a lot.
I think it does. So your book is a Gun Curious. Again, the subtitle, A Liberal Professor's Surprising Journey Inside America's Gun Culture, by David Yamane. And you can pick that up in all the places where you get books.
Yeah, the book becomes available on June 1st. That it'll take a little bit to get it from the warehouses out into people's hands, but you can order it, of course, anytime. But the books will be shipping very soon after June 1st.
Excellent. So go check it out. Thank you so much, David Yamane.
Thank you.
Okay, Weer'd. So I haven't read the book yet because it just came out, but I have to ask, did you ask him where he got the title Gun Curious from?
I did not. I'm not going to claim that I invented it, because it's a very easy thing to think up, and certainly someone has thought of it during my lifetime. I'm the first person that I'm aware of using it, and I started using it
like in 2016 describing the purpose of Blazing Sword, and I deliberately modeled it after Bi-Curious.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see someone else using that term, look, I'm not offended. I'm not saying you stole it from me. It's just, is this parallel evolution? Did I influence you in some way? I just want to know.
Yeah.
I'm not bothered one way or another. I just want to know.
I know I've heard Collier Noir use it as well, and I don't know if he heard you use it before, but I also could say that he would have a very good argument for it to be convergent evolution, in the fact that Collier Noir has definitely just gone out and just embraced the anti-gun insult of ammosexual, claiming that we are somehow aroused by our firearms and we should be ashamed of who we are and what we are. And he just turned around and said gun curious, because, hey, if you're going to sexualize it, then fine, I'll sexualize it even more.
Yeah.
But, yeah, no, I completely forgot to ask, because I just straight up assumed, again, yeah, it does sound a lot like Bi-Curious. And I just assumed that was kind of the salacious title that was added onto it. But yeah, I have a copy of it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but I look forward to it, because yeah, it's super duper interesting. And again, I love meeting people who consider are from the left of center and would be considered what I'd say a non-traditional gun owner. And I say that in quotes because as I keep meeting more and more of these non-traditional gun owners, starting to think that I don't think there is a traditional gun owner. I think there's a stereotype that exists, but that may not be even remotely close to the majority.
Well, I mean, that's certainly what we want, though. Mm-hmm. We want the Second Amendment to be for all Americans and not just people of a particular culture or political persuasion.
Absolutely. And again, if you are left of center, or if you know someone who is left of center, there is nothing about the Second Amendment that conflicts with their political platform. Everybody has the right to self-defense. Everybody has the right to defend themselves. And everyone should be afraid of a tyrannical government. Maybe you're afraid of a left-wing tyrannical government. Maybe you're afraid of a right-wing tyrannical government. Maybe you're someone like me who's just afraid of tyrannical governments, and I don't care what their flag they're waving. I don't want them. So,
join for the fear, stay for the freedom.
Exactly. So there is no partisan angle to the Second Amendment. It supports everybody's cause. If you are, no matter how you stand, you are, unless you're a tyrannical government person, then in which case I don't like you. Go away.
Also, shout out to our friends at the Liberal Gun Club.
Yes, 100% shout out to our friends at the Liberal Gun Club. Shout out to our friends at Pink Pistol and Operation Blazing Sword. There are people of every political walk of life there, and they are supporting the right to keep and bear arms because, yeah, it's for everybody.
You don't need to shout. I'm right here.
I'm excited.
He walks the line, the firing line, but not always. David is here to tell us the difference between range safety officers and instructors.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. In previous segments, I've talked about my roles as range safety officer and instructor. While these personas do overlap to some degree, they each have their distinct areas of responsibility. So in this segment, I'd like to talk about some of the similarities and differences between RSO and instructor hats. As an RSO, my responsibility is to keep an eye on the entire range and everyone present, shooters and non-shooters alike. In a larger group, this can be challenging, which is why best practice is considered to be one RSO for every 5 shooters. On a commercial range, this rarely happens. One RSO per 10 shooters is much more common. However, when I'm on the range as an instructor, my focus is on the 1 or 2 students I'm dealing with at that time. This environment also recommends no more than 5 shooters to 1 instructor, and is much more likely to hold to that standard. While wearing my RSO hat, it's important that I'm constantly walking the shooting line looking in on each shooter, but not interacting with them unless I see an issue. Generally, an issue is categorized as something that will likely cause harm to a person or equipment. such as thumb behind the slide on a semi-auto handgun, muzzle direction, malfunctions, and so on. Unfortunately, it's all too easy for an RSO to miss a concerning action in one shooting bay because our focus is on another. On more than one occasion, I've had to get band-aids for shooters who tore up their thumb by putting it in the wrong place. Something I likely could have caught if I'd been watching that shooter in particular. Sometimes we're lucky enough to be in the right place when something goes wrong. Other times, we aren't. Having shot at both types of ranges, I much prefer the one where the RSO is walking the line than one where they use video feeds from another room. Immediacy of response can mean the difference between an ambulance and a hearse. In contrast to RSO, if I'm teaching, I generally stand right next to the student. This is for two reasons. One, so I can monitor and adjust stance, grip, etc. as necessary, and two, so I can take control of the gun if they do something dangerous. Case in point. Memorial Day weekend, we had friends over and decided to do some shooting in my backyard range. One of the shooters was brand new, while the others were of low to moderate experience. At one point, the new shooter, who was using a .22 semi-auto pistol, had a failure to fire. Not uncommon with rimfires. When she got a click instead of the expected bang, she began to turn the gun sideways to try to determine the issue, sweeping the muzzle towards but not at the other people in the range area. In that split second, I was able to grab the gun and redirect the muzzle back down range, because I was standing right at her shoulder. Before shooting, we'd gone over the 4 primary rules of gun safety, but she was new enough they weren't ingrained. To her credit, she expressed shock and regret at what she'd done, and I think she'll be more aware of muzzle direction next time she's on the range. As an RSO, I may give quick pointers, such as adjustments to stance or grip, but I don't have the luxury of focusing any amount of time on just one shooter, especially if I'm watching a line of 10. I have to keep moving unless there's an actual issue. Since I have more of an instructor mindset, it does take a certain amount of extra effort for me to do this consistently. There's considerably more involved in becoming either a certified RSO or instructor, but anyone should be able to pick up the basics so they can help make the range that much safer. For any listeners who are considering taking on either or both of these roles, please keep in mind what's required for each of them. Have fun and safe shooting.
Ready on the right, ready on the left, all ready on the firing line, fire!
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brenna Bach and David Bach. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
I gotta say, a good RSO is a huge thing that can either make or break a range experience. Like I've definitely seen people have like a gun jam up or an issue happen with something, and the range officers stepped up and said, "Oh, here's what you need to do," or "Be careful doing that." And of course, as you know, I'm sure, you know, David mentioned, you know, you might see something doing really dangerous, like crossing their thumbs behind the slide of a semi-auto or something like that, and they can quickly jump in and go, "Hey, stop! You might hurt yourself." But I have definitely also like had some busybody range officers that have just absolutely just been the, you know what, maybe I don't need to shoot up all of this ammo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I realized that well, I don't know if it's in vogue to hate on RSOs. I know that it is in vogue to hate upon cops. And I don't know if it's universal, although I suspect that it is. But it seems like a lot of RSOs are either retired military or retired police, or perhaps active police who are looking to make a little bit more money.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to find where I wrote it, and I'm not finding it right now. It wasn't even a bad interaction with an RSO. It was one of those, you're just a self-important jerk. And so here's the thing. I was shooting at a public range. It was a county run range. And I was, at the rifle line shooting a rifle. And because I am a lawful concealed carrier, I was lawfully concealed carrying. And while I wasn't open carrying, but I'm at a range, I'm not really concerned about covering.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were shooting, and the RSO comes up to me, and he tells me that I'm not allowed to have a holstered gun and I need to remove it. Now, here's the thing. The range has explicit instructions saying, don't draw from a holster. Now, I know what they mean is don't draw from your holster and shoot the target. But the rule doesn't say that. The rule says don't draw from a holster. And I've got an RSO telling me to draw my gun from a holster. And it's just, you're telling me to break the rules. And he is like, I don't care, do it. And it was just like, yeah, okay, I'm done here. I packed up my gear and I left.
Yep.
And it was just, what do you think you're protecting? It really, to me, felt like he was just being officious and power tripping, and I can make you do it, so I will make you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was honestly worried that then it was, oh, hey, you drew from your holster, you broke the rules, I'm going to kick you out and possibly ban you. And it was just like, nope. I'm not sticking around for this.
Yeah. And also, one must also point out the soil from which they are sown from is, I know something that is in vogue on hating on the internet, which is FUD ranges. The ones that have like the best way to know that you're in a FUD range is if there is a timed interval between shots that must be obeyed. So if they say no shots more than 2 seconds, closer than 2 seconds apart, or something like that, where, if you've got a semi-auto gun, you have to shoot it like a bolt action. And those ones tend to have the worst range officers because their rules suck. and all that. It's one of those. My club has two wonderful things. One is the rule for fire is don't shoot any faster than you can keep rounds on paper. Beautiful. If someone's spraying at the target and they're just sending rounds willy-nilly and bouncing them off the baffles and bouncing them off the dirt, well, guess what? You're shooting too fast. You're getting warned. You're possibly getting reprimanded. But also, there are no range safety officers. Every range has got closed circuit televisions, and everybody is expected to know the club rules, and so people will just naturally and usually very politely remind people of the rules and make suggestions of what stuff's going on. And the only time that I've ever seen voices raised, there was one time when one person was being a bit of a dick, but every other time when voices are being raised, it's, someone didn't turn on the flashing light that's indicating that the range is cold and no one's going through, or people are stepping in front of the firing line while people are downrange, or things like that are explicitly dangerous. And hey, stop doing that right now. But other than that, it's just people go and they have a good time and nobody gets hurt. So that's the best. But Aaron,
our listeners.
That's right. Our listeners are the best. Each and every one of you. We really appreciate you listening to this fine podcast. I'm glad you're enjoying it. We're doing this for all of you. But I got to give a special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. They're the ones that help keep the lights on, keep everything going. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP Mag Dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, currently the only place where you can rate us. Subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's called weerdworld.com. That's weerdworld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
Weird Beard likes talking about Trump, and I don't. I'm just so over it. Our opinions on 45 are assorted, but our opinions on 45 ACP are not. And so's our podcast. It's a non sequitur. I don't care. Good night.
45 ACP forever.